This is Interpreting Wine host and founder Lawrence Francis, welcoming you to this, my Willamette Valley Winemaker Special. Across these 20 episodes recorded in quickfire fashion in January 2020, I got to meet a broad selection of people making wine in the region, both a variety of winemaking scale from the micro to the macro, and also different focuses that include different aging vessels, different grape varieties, sparkling wines, and of course different interpretations of Pinot. Episodes are going to be released in the order that they were recorded, so you'll get to be a virtual guest on the tour. 2 things you can do to help spread this series even further. One is to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, either where you're listening or on your favorite podcast platform. And the second, the one that's really going to help push this out there, is to head to interpretingwine.com/iTunes and leave a review letting me know what you think. A genuine, huge thank you in advance. Today's episode of the Willamette Valley Winemaker Special features Julia Burke, Marketing Manager at the Willamette Valley Wineries Association. She tells us her origin story and transition into the wine world. She gives us a Willamette Valley virtual tour before talking in depth on Pinot Noir and what it brings to the region. We discuss Enotourism, times of the year to visit, international markets, and she looks ahead for 2020. Enjoy.
I grew up in Western New York, Buffalo, New York, and I majored in Asian studies, which is actually a great way to get into wine because I graduated in 2008 and there were no jobs. So I was going wine tasting in our local wine region in Western New York, which that's the Niagara Escarpment. It was my first time ever wine tasting, and I showed up at this one winery 10 minutes before they closed. I did not want to do that. My boyfriend convinced me that they were nice and it would be okay. And we went in and they said, no problem, we'll do a tasting. We tasted a few wines and they were like, do you want to see what we're drinking? Mm-hmm. And they had behind the counter 1999 Louis Jadot Gevrey Chambertin, and they poured me a little bit, and I was kind of blown away, and we talked about it a little more, and they said, actually, do you want to work here? We've been looking for somebody on Saturdays to come pour in the tasting room, and I did, and I started showing up all the time because it was a small family winery, and there was always something to do, whether it was helping in the vineyard, helping with events. During the harvest, of course, it was all hands on deck for production, and I loved it. And then January came around, and there was not a lot to do, so I wanted more, and I emailed a bunch of wineries in the Southern Hemisphere and asked if I could work harvest. And this was before there were really as many kind of harvest forums as there are now. I kind of just stalked and emailed a bunch of random people. And I ended up in South Africa. I did a 6-month harvest at Blauwklippen Vineyards in Stellenbosch. It was incredible. And by then I had definitely gotten the wine bug, but I was also writing. I was a food writer, beer writer, doing some more political journalism as well. So I kind of did both for a few years before realizing that I didn't want to make my living writing. I wanted writing to be my fun thing, whereas I found the more I worked in wine, the more I liked it. So I decided wine was going to be the thing that I pursued. And so it's been 11 years. I've worked in many different aspects of the industry. I did the small winery thing where I was in the tasting room, but also production. I did a couple harvests in South Africa. I did big retail. I was a buyer for a very small retailer in Chicago. And I have worked for an importer as a sales rep. And I've worked in a couple restaurants, and now in my current role, I sort of do a little bit of everything. So it's been a nice kind of way to tie it all together. I work for the Willamette Valley Wineries Association, which is the regional trade association for the Willamette Valley, and my job is marketing and communications, but that ends up meaning a little bit of everything because I do a lot of our written material. I'm extremely involved with that. I do a lot of writing. I am very involved in our education endeavors, whether it's supporting a masterclass that we have, Bree Stock, who's an MW here, doing, or Elaine Brown. I support them, but I also teach seminars on behalf of the association myself. I do. So we have several events throughout the year, and because we're only a team of 5, we all kind of end up doing a little bit of everything. But we have an event, Pinot in the City, that is around the country. I'm very involved with that. I work on Oregon Pinot Camp and the auction, and it ends up being sometimes a matter of just collecting a lot of information from wineries and organizing and haranguing them a little bit about getting their things in so that we can execute our event. And sometimes it's a little bit more higher level, like supporting, Oregon Pinot Camp's education kind of direction and figuring and working with the curriculum committee on where that goes. And yeah, it's one of those jobs where it's not the same thing every day, which is probably the only way that I could have an office job.
Communication is obviously, what we're doing today, and is your job, and I think we'll definitely loop back around and talk to Pinot in the City, Pinot Camp, and the other initiatives that are kind of I guess the interface between what you're doing here and the outside world. I've been here now for 3 nights, so kind of third full day of getting out there and interviewing, and really been struck by a number of different things that I'll sort of get into, I think, and pick up. And one of them has been the eloquence of the winemakers here. So I think that's certainly something that I think I'd be keen to get your thoughts on. One of the ways that that's demonstrated itself, though, is because I've asked them to speak to their land, to their terroir, and to kind of take us on that kind of virtual tour. And I think that it would be interesting to ask you, kind of as a as a non-winemaker, to kind of take us around that terroir, maybe from a slightly higher perspective, so kind of a helicopter perspective, and let us know, and maybe somebody who wants to orientate themselves to Oregon and to the Willamette Valley from a slightly higher perspective. What are the types of messages that you're getting out there, and translate that for the people?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we talk about the Willamette Valley in terms of wine, I think we're really looking at the relationships with these key geographical features. The Coast Range, which is on the kind of, if you're looking at Oregon, on the left side, closer to the ocean. And then we have the Cascade Range on the right side of the river, which is so east and separating our region from the Eastern Oregon desert, which a lot of people don't realize that Eastern Oregon is absolutely desert-like conditions, and it's just as important to protect our valley from that as it is to protect from the Pacific Ocean, which is really rainy and much colder. So you're going to hear winemakers, when they talk about their site, often describe their relationship to the Coast Range and how much of a rain shadow they're in, how much exposure they have to cold air from the Pacific Ocean. For example, the Van Duzer Corridor is an anomaly in the Coast Range where more cool air from the ocean does come in. So that directly impacts it moderates the climate in the Van Duzer Corridor AVA, but also Yosemite Hills and McMinnville, which are nearby. Mm-hmm. It thickens the skins of the grapes. It gives you a little bit more, or it reduces disease pressure a little bit. So that's just one example. Up in Yamhill Carlton, which is northern valley, it's one of the northernmost AVA in the valley. On that western side, you do see like this kind of more extreme rain shadow. You have a lot of sites that are just really shallow marine sedimentary soils, just kind of like on the Coast Range slopes. It's really interesting kind of to see all the different ways that those mountains can create site opportunities. And then on the right side with the Cascade Range on the east side, again, it's really just protection from the desert, and you see a little bit fewer vineyards on that side, but there are some really interesting ones. And then in the middle, we've got the valley floor, which is the lowest kind of under 200 feet area of the valley, and that's really fertile soil. It's you're not going to get as much frost protection, so you tend to see more agricultural products like hazelnuts and things like that in those areas. So that brings me to elevation, which is obviously a huge part when we're talking about cool climate winemaking. Elevation helps us with drainage. It certainly helps us with, if you're talking about a certain aspect, it's helping us with ripening. But if we get too high, then it can be really, really cold. So it's about hitting that sweet spot, which for most winemakers, it's between 200 and 1,000 feet in elevation. So that's where you tend to see most of the really great sites. There are a couple that are over that 1,000-foot mark. So at the two mountain ranges, the Willamette River itself is actually not one of the biggest influences on wine growing, which is kind of funny because of the name of the region. But it does kind of run through that middle valley floor. We've got a little bit of air movement and frost protection there, and then in terms of soils, we have a few major events. The first one being just before anything else happened to this region, it was underwater. It was the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. So we have all of this marine sedimentary soil that's really, really old, especially in Yamhill-Carlton, some of the oldest soils in the valley. After that, we had these volcanic eruptions that just deposited all of this wonderful basaltic soil in the valley. You see a lot of that in the Dundee Hills, but it's really pretty spread out. And then we had the Missoula floods, which brought in a bunch of kind of more fertile soil settling in the valley floor. And we also have these windblown soils that are loess. So that's kind of like lighter soils that are up in the Chehalem Mountains area. We've got a couple of, and in the Yamhill-Carlton areas as well, we have a couple of petitioned AVAs that are really focused on emphasizing that laurelwood soil type, which is that windblown soil. So those are the soils. Those three, the Missoula floods soils, are really not in the main winemaking areas, but those are really the three that are the most influential in our region. And you will tend to see winemakers talk about a blend of a couple different ones. Some sites are actually just only marine sedimentary or only basaltic, but it's kind of interesting to have that diversity of kind of permutations that we have. And with this one grape that is very, very expressive, as at the forefront, it's kind of fun to play with, single clone, single soil type, combinations of, tasting a couple different soil types side by side, things like that. So that's kind of one of the fun things about being a Pinot Noir country, is that Pinot really does express those things pretty strongly. You're going to have a grape that does really well. Pinot's not a bad one to have. There's a famous line from Jim Clark, who's Wines of South Africa, who's said, if you're going to pick a grape for your region, make sure that it's the right one. And I think with Pinot, we have something that does show that diversity for sure. But also, I think what makes this region interesting is it is so young. And one of the things that Jason Lett likes to talk about is that his dad and Charles Corey and our other kind of pioneer winemakers and winemaking families chose this region because of its propensity for Pinot. It's an intentional region. It wasn't just we're moving here, let's plant something, which that has produced a lot of really great wine. But in this case, it really was researching what are the best regions in the world for Pinot Noir, finding this place and just deciding this is where we're going to do Pinot. And I think, it has borne out that there's really no other New World region, I think, that is doing the same level of diversity. And also just, I think people, critics are saying nice things about us. But more than that, I think that it's just really cool to see all these different personalities who have come here from all over. We've got people from France, we've got people from California, we've got people from Chicago and Minnesota and Colorado. And it's just really fun to talk to. One of my favorite things about my job is that I get to work with the winemakers all the time, and I get to feel like I'm serving these families, and they are all people who came out here because they had a dream. And, I think with Pinot, it's a really tough grape to hang your hopes and dreams on. And so I think it's kind of impressive. But it's always tricky when you have that one flagship grape. We have other grapes that do very well. We don't want to have people think that you're only going to drink Pinot if you come out here. That's certainly not true. I definitely have had friends come out and visit here, and they say, okay, but there's one problem. I don't like Pinot. and I'm happy that they would come out anyway. It shows that people associate us first and foremost with good wine. But also I try to encourage them to, open their minds a little bit. Pinot can taste like a lot of different, it has a lot of different expressions. But also, it's you want to make sure that you when you're emphasizing your flagship grape, you're not boxing yourself into a corner. And I think, like I said, with the diversity of sites that we have, with how much is still to come in terms of growth here and how young we are as a region, I think it's an exciting grape to have kind of gathered around, and it'll be fun to see what comes next.
Hopefully, when those friends did come out here, they were able to find a Pinot that they actually liked, because I was even just saying just now to Kate Norris, trying a Pinot with her, and I'm really trying to log all of these experiences and tastings that I'm having. And, I genuinely feel like every single Pinot that I've had has been totally different, right the way across the board. And, I for one kind of can't wait to kind of list out all of those Pinots that I've had. And they, some of them have been bright in color, more structure and more power. Others have been more fruit forward. Others have been, we just had one with a sort of a more saline finish. And I think it really speaks to how that geology, that geography, that terroir, or however you want to call it, then shows up in the glass. And, I'll continue to do that, I think, on the rest of the journey. And I'm really enjoying exploring that diversity. And I think it just reinforces why, the Pinot works so well here. One thing that I think, really ties in with me being here and I believe, your role and the kind of things that you're looking at is visiting, people who are coming from outside, be that from other parts of the States or indeed coming from overseas, and kind of talking to that. And I believe you've recently done a visitor survey, and I think that would be helpful to me, to the listener, just to kind of, set the scene in terms of what's going on, because I guess it obviously has important ramifications for the wineries themselves if they're able to sell their wines at the cellar door, but then I guess also equally wider ramifications for the region as well. The other tourist activities that happen and the tourist dollar that comes in. People eat, people drink, people travel around. So just talk to that and kind of set the scene for what that looks like in 2020.
Yeah, so we did, it was kind of the first of its kind, a real deep dive into, who is our visitor. And the first thing that we found that we weren't sure we were going to find, and it's encouraging, is that people do come to the Valley specifically for the reputation for high quality wine and specifically for Pinot. It was an overwhelmingly large number of people who said that they came here for Pinot Noir, which means that we're getting wine drinkers who know enough about wine to know that. We're getting wine drinkers who are kind of nerds, because you have to be kind of a nerd to be really into Pinot, I think. And it was really encouraging to see that they came from all over. We had, visitors from Texas in large numbers. We had visitors from Florida, Minneapolis. It was really cool to see that many people associated us with high quality and associated us with Pinot, because it is a struggle when you're on retail shelves and people don't have the benefit of coming out here and seeing the vineyards. Our Pinot is not cheap. Our wines are not cheap. The price points are not the kind of thing where somebody just grabbing a Tuesday night wine might say, oh, you know what, I'm going to do a $75 Willamette Valley Pinot, So it was good to see that. We certainly saw, when you were talking about, do people come out here just to taste, or are they doing other things? Oregon's an amazing state for tourism, and people, when they come out here, they do outdoor sports. They go to breweries. It's important to have the package deal for people and to recognize that and to remind people that that's of all the options that are out there, because even the biggest wine nerd can't taste wine and only wine for 4 days. I have tried. We're all dating people. Yep, exactly. Yeah. We saw that. And also, independent of the survey, people call the office all the time asking us to help them plan trips. That is a very common part of all of our jobs, but I particularly enjoy it, so I take a lot of those calls. And it's definitely the trend is that people, they know Pinot, they might have one or two wineries that they like, but basically it's just, I want to be in the Willamette Valley. Where do I go? What do I do? And then eventually they want to also maybe add some hiking, maybe go to the coast. That's kind of an obvious addition because the Oregon coast is gorgeous and a little bit less crowded than other coastal areas. So it's important for us to, remember when the people that we're talking to are looking for that package deal, and also they tend to be really highly wine educated. It's important to not only speak to those people, because you want people who are, new to wine and just know that it's a cool region, and they have associated Portland with something interesting that they want to go visit. And that's something too. So many of our visitors start in Portland and then come down just for the day or a couple of days. And increasingly, maybe staying 3 or 4 days and staying out here, which I think is nice for just not having to drive, back after drinking a lot of wine. But just as a jumping off point, the tourism strength that Portland has is certainly a bonus. We're so close. Our closest wineries, I mean, we have urban wineries in Portland, and then we have wineries 20 minutes, 40 minutes away, up to an hour and a half away, and then you can spend some time in Eugene, which is another really cool town. So I think that's really that's helpful, and it's good that people associate both of those places with cool breweries, interesting shops and restaurants, and kind of that outdoorsy vibe, which is great. So yeah, I think that when we do events like Pinot in a City, like Auction, which is for trade, like OPC, which is for trade, it's making sure that we're really bringing something cool of value to that high-end wine consumer who knows that we are doing something neat, but maybe doesn't have a lot of ability to go and taste the wine yet, because we don't have a lot of it. So we want to bring it out to people. We want to work the market as best we can, and make sure that people can taste what, as I mentioned, the variety of wines that we have. Because I think one of the cool things with Pinot, as opposed to maybe Cabernet or something like that, is you can taste the differences because it is a lighter wine. You can go from one winery table to another at an event like a trade event or something like that, and you can actually taste, this was lighter soil, this was a warmer vintage, et cetera, et cetera. Vintage variation is another thing that I think we have it's nice to be able to show with the grape that we focus on. But yeah, so that's kind of the next. Once you know who your visitor is, then it's about making sure that visitor is happy, but also finding more of them, and also making sure that you're thinking about the other visitors. Like, what are some other groups that could be coming out here and aren't yet? So,
I think it's a good point for me to share something quite personal about the time that I've spent here, because I guess January is not necessarily peak month here and the time when most people choose to come over here, but I've got to say, I find, I think on two different levels, it's really got a lot going for it. I mean, I still sort of processing it, and obviously haven't had a chance to edit it yet. But I was up at the Cours de Terre vineyard this morning, and actually, as the GPS kind of sent me off on this winding gravel road going up there, I nearly came off the road at one point because it was just so beautiful. My attention was taken to the outside, and this that low hanging kind of fog or mist or whatever it's sort of known as. It was just it was sort of otherworldly. It was really ethereal, just to kind of wind my way up to this incredible place. And I think of course I'm in a very privileged position to be doing what I'm doing, but that being said, I haven't come across hordes of people here either. It's not as though feel like I'm going to be competing for room at these wineries, and maybe the nature of the winemaker themselves in the space of the year, they're maybe a little bit more relaxed because there's less stuff happening in the vineyards. They're kind of sleeping as well. So I just sort of invite you to say something to a winter visit or a kind of a perceived off-season visit, and maybe just like link that to I guess some of the other seasonality and what the other good times to visit. But start with winter, because that's the season that I've come in.
So I love this time of year. I always tell my friends, if they can, to come in January, February, March. We have a name for it. We call it the cellar season. The wines are in the barrel, they're barreling down, and kind of so are the people. That is the vibe that's extended out, where everyone can kind of take a breath after harvest, after the holiday season. And the winemakers are actually around. It's you're much more likely to get to meet them. You are much more likely to get to do an educational seminar when you come visit. If you take a look at what events are going on, you notice much more kind of serious focused stuff this time of year because people have the bandwidth for that. I really love that term just because that is how the vineyards feel as well. It's just the feeling of the entire community, which is this just kind of deep breath, relax, and now let's move forward. And there's the anticipation of spring and all the busyness that's going to happen then, because as soon as you start bottling, then of course for the wineries, it's busy again and rushed. But this one moment is so special. And one of the things that I think native Oregonians don't appreciate is how wonderful the winter is here compared to, say, I grew up in Buffalo, New York. And I do think that winter is wonderful, but in a very different way where you don't necessarily want to drive anywhere because you have 7 feet of snow. But it's not that cold. There's going to be gentle rain most of the time. Something that I think is really underrated is just the sky patterns this time of year. We've got beautiful cloud formations all the time on this green landscape, and it's just very striking with the trees. And sometimes I just take a drive and just watch the clouds on days like this because it's just a beautiful winter. It's not something I've ever experienced anywhere else. And that's my perspective from growing up in cold climates. But I also imagine that if you are from Arizona, New Mexico, Southern California, because we get a lot of these visitors this time of year, they just want to see rain. They just want to experience greenery and this, lush, fertile landscape that we have. So I think in terms of natural beauty, this is a really underrated time to visit. I think it's very comfortable and moderate compared to most of the U.S. in terms of just the weather. But more than anything else, it is the time when you're not going to be in a big crowd when you taste. You can really take your time. It's a quieter environment. You can ask those questions that maybe you wouldn't feel like you can ask. Although I do think that in general our region is it's pretty good about crowd control, where there shouldn't be a time where you just don't feel like you shouldn't feel too rushed at any point. But it's true that at this quieter time of year, you really feel like you can take your time, and I just love that, and I think the winemakers appreciate it too. Something a lot of people forget is that winemakers, spend it's a little bit of a lonely pursuit sometimes, in that they spend a lot of time with their cellar team and their wines, and it is very rewarding for them to actually get to taste with customers occasionally and hear people try their wines for the first time and hear questions that they don't normally get to answer. And I have so I did a harvest at Alexana when I first moved here, and it's a wonderful place. And the winemaker, Brian, is a very education-focused winemaker, and he is great at explaining things. And I remember he just went through the tasting room to grab something quickly one time, and it was the end of harvest, so it was kind of like we could breathe for a second. And he saw a customer tasting through a flight and just heard them ask a question and just came over and wanted to talk to them and answer it. He didn't even introduce himself. He was just like, "Oh, I can answer that question." And I think it just exemplifies that passion that our winemakers have for getting those chances to talk about what they do and really share their passion and hear honest feedback and see someone's face when they try something that they love. I think, people forget how much of a boost that is for them, especially after they just worked, crazy 100-some-hour weeks for 3 months. It's just this really nice, special time where we can all kind of appreciate what we're doing here. I certainly don't want to discourage anyone from visiting in the summer. We do have beautiful summers. It's the peak season. Something that right before the summer gets really crazy and wedding season. Before that, we have Memorial Weekend, which is we actually do an event at Memorial Weekend where a lot of wineries that aren't normally open to the public, Belle Pont is an example, what we're drinking here, will open for like a kind of open house where you get a chance to taste these wines and you wouldn't normally get to do that. Some wineries have live music and food trucks. There's all sorts of different possibilities of things you can do. And we do a similar one at Thanksgiving. So kind of the bookends of the busiest time of year are these weekends where it's, especially at Thanksgiving, if you have family and you're trying to find something to do together, there will be these bigger wineries or bigger events where there might be something more family focused. You will have also smaller wineries doing, library tastings and a little more nerdy things. So there's really something for everybody on both of those times. And I think it's really nice because at neither time are you hitting the craziness of, a Saturday in the middle of summer. And because this is Oregon, both of those times you can rely on it being pretty good weather, especially Memorial Day. Spring here is just outrageously beautiful. With all the flowers popping up in the greenery, and it's been warm for several weeks already by that point, which is another thing that I'm not used to coming from where I live. So, I think I would say both those times are times that I really love to go out and just kind of take a drive and go taste at a couple places.
It feels interesting to me because, I don't know, potentially the summer will kind of take care of itself. It's like, you're up there, you're in one of the kind of largest, most well-known wine-producing regions of America. So arguably, obviously you need to keep doing great things as you are with the wine, but maybe that will sort of take care of itself. So it's interesting to hear you talk to those other times. And it's something I'm curious about, Rita. I guess just, getting a bit meta in the context of podcasting. I mean, and the way that you kind of, spoke to the advantages of coming in those different seasons. I mean, is that a message that you've actually been able to put out there in a similar way, in a way that you'd want to through other media in the past, or is this kind of the first time that you're putting that message out there?
Yeah. So with cellar season specifically, we did do just an advertising campaign the year that we kicked it off. It was really just kind of, hey, letting everybody know that this is actually an awesome time to visit. And that was just a matter of some local media and a few, advertising campaigns here and there and content on our website, and also just encouraging wineries to share what they're doing. That's kind of something that we always want to do, is make sure that if you're a winery and you have some sort of cool event going on right now that wouldn't normally be happening the rest of the year, make sure you tell us so that we can promote it, tag your social media so that we can repost it, and we have the feed going on our site of social media tags for different events. So that way people can kind of say, okay, what does cellar season look like in the Valley? And I can go and take a look at that. So with that one specifically, we've done a little bit of promotion, but it's definitely been the kind of thing where we just kind of want people to come and see for themselves as well. It's something that we promote, as well as Memorial Day weekend and Thanksgiving. We do a catalog. So anybody who wants one can get this kind of guidebook to all of the events and all the wineries and everything that's going on. And of course, local media writes about it, and regional media too, because a lot of people come down from Seattle and things like that, just because it is really good. It's a really good amount of events. It's really good bang for your buck, and it's definitely the kind of thing where whether you're a wine nerd or you're trying to entertain your in-laws and a bunch of kids, or you're trying to entertain a partner or something like that, and you're just looking for a romantic day out, there is going to be something for you. So we do take opportunities to promote those three.
I really love the way that you're describing this here, because you're talking to your market. You're talking to the people that are going to come from the States, going to fly in and going to drive up. And I think, relating it back to where we're talking, on the podcast, I've noticed a steady rise in people listening in all parts of the state. So, hopefully this is actually going to really help people to understand kind of what's on offer here, and, totally it's worth coming over here. I'm having really one of the best weeks of my life, and I'm halfway through it now. And, I just can't wait to see what the rest of the week kind of holds for me. That being said, I say I'm looking at the stats and can kind of see where people are listening. I obviously have a lot of listeners in the UK, being that I'm from London. UK and the US make up around 60% of the listeners, and that then means, there's 40% kind of, spread right the way across the rest of the world. And, I think I want to kind of talk to them really, to I guess, the 70% that are not listening in the US. And, my take is that, it is then a lot more investment for them to fly in and to come over here. But the counterbalance to that is that you've got the bottle. You've got the bottle as the ambassador, really, to go out to those countries. And I know that, earlier this week you were in Hong Kong. So I think, I want to just ask a broad question to, as I say, bring in that sort of 70% of people and just, talk to the export markets, talk to where around the world are some of these wines ending up, being that, all of those things you've said, there's low amounts, there's lots of fans in the US, and indeed a lot of these wineries can sell all of their wines in the US. Just, what is the kind of current state of affairs with these wines getting out there onto tables and, making new fans out there in the rest of the world?
Yeah, so while we are a small percentage of the world market, and with the caveat, as I said, we are a lot of very small producers, and just the distribution in general is a challenge because of just quantity of wine. However, while I wasn't in Hong Kong for work, I am kind of always working, and that wine is my passion, and I'm always interested in what's being talked about at the wine bars, what's in the stores, and I was thrilled in Hong Kong, just walking down the street on the way to dinner in this neighborhood that wasn't even there's several neighborhoods in Hong Kong where it's like there's a fancy wine store in every corner. It's an amazing wine city. But this particular neighborhood was, not particularly that. But I wandered into a wine shop and they've got, 89 Bordeaux, they've got some really amazing Grand Cru Burgundy, and then they had a bottle of Argyle Extended Tirage Brut from right here. And I was just so happy it was on the same table with those. And I mentioned it to the salesman, and he was just like, "Oh yeah, Willamette Valley is wonderful." And he had a market for that. And we do have wineries who are distributed in the UK. We have some that are pretty focused internationally, and it's pretty impressive. And I have heard from the winemakers who have traveled and worked the market internationally that people do recognize Willamette Valley for Pinot, which is great. And it's just going to be a matter of working, the relatively small amount of wine that we have, getting it into the right places, because there are some incredibly sophisticated drinkers in, like I said, Hong Kong, in France, in the UK. I was in Italy in September, and I went to Barolo, and I brought a couple of bottles from the Willamette Valley, just kind of as a fun thing, because I had a feeling they probably didn't get to try a lot of it, and they were so excited. Roberto Conterno, I brought him a bottle, and he was just like, scrutinizing the label and fascinated and like writing it down and like asking his translator to like, it was really fun. And I was happy that they were aware of it, aware of the region. They were aware of the wine, and they were excited to try it, and they wanted to share with their coworkers and things like that. So, you can see they don't get a lot of that wine in that area. They've got plenty of their own, and Italians are not hurting for local wine. But yeah, it's definitely, I feel that we can offer something on the world market, because, I've worked in a lot of jobs where I was mainly working with international wines that you can't get anywhere else. You can't get this. I mean, the price point is different from what it is in any other Pinot producing region, and I think the quality and the range of styles is kind of special. So, yeah, I mean, it's that balancing act of dealing with the fact that we don't have a huge quantity of wine, but we do have very international focused wineries who want to be in the right places and want to meet the right people. And I mean, if you look at our winemaking community here, we have so many French speakers at this point. We have, when I first came here for Harvest, I lived in a house where there was French spoken as often as English, and a lot of the second generation folks, Jason Led and Lizzie Adelson, like they were raised speaking French, and they travel there, and it's that connection is really important, and it's one of the things that makes our community great, but it's also one of the things that makes our community more international than you would expect for Oregon, because we do get, we have interns from New Zealand and Australia and stuff every year, and it's always really fun to talk to them. But also sometimes they come and they stay, and we have winemakers who are really, from all sorts of amazing parts of the world. So that's encouraging, and I think it's really good, and it's something that it's not part of my role to market internationally, but it is something that I think is really great that organizations like Oregon Wine Board are doing.
I just sort of, leave it in typical interpreting wine style. It's kind of throw the door open for you to kind of look ahead. Again, we're sitting here at the start of the year and, in your role and as the WVWA, what are the sorts of things that you're looking forward to, particularly as we kind of, come out of or go deeper into cellar season and then move through the other seasons that you've already alluded to.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're in marketing, you're always looking like half a year ahead or a year ahead. But I really do believe that this is a very exciting time for our region. As I mentioned, we're growing fast. We are very sustainability focused as a region. Oregon is something like, I think 47% of the vineyards are certified with sustainability, which is incredible for a state. But if you talk to our winemakers, I'm sure like every single one of them touched on sustainability in some way. And with climate change as big of a conversation as it is in the world, that is something that is on everyone's mind. So I think that people already, like there have been, there's a new certification just created in the Pacific Northwest live that is now widely adopted. There's so many people who are biodynamic and organic practitioners, and we're seeing, more and more people adopt those practices, more and more wineries as they open, converting over. And I think we have leaders like Mimi Castile talking about, how farmers and winemakers, can be and should be at the forefront of trying to save the world and fight climate change. And I think that this is the region that I want to be in for that conversation, because I think that people are very, very smart and passionate, and there's a lot of just very intense drive right now to make sure that we leave a better world for the next generation of winemakers and kids. So I think that's something that I'm expecting to hear talked about even more than it already is in the next year. We are very here in Oregon, we're very passionate about protecting our vineyard workers and our families, and we have this program Salud that is an auction that raises money for vineyard workers' health care. There's more and more discussion of how can we support and be inclusive of and encourage more diverse communities to come and taste wine and work in the industry. And that's something that I care about very deeply, but it's also something that our association and our community really cares about a lot. And I think it's really fun to watch the new sites get discovered, and being as young as we are, every region has a critical mass point where they start. For us, it was Dundee Hills, and when you're trying to create an industry from scratch, you're relying on each other. You don't have an infrastructure, so it makes sense to all be in one place. But as we've grown, we see more and more of the valley, which was written with this incredible, vision of how vast the diversity of our region could be. We're starting to see, wineries pop up in the South Willamette Valley, in area like some petitions for AVAs being written that are not, just up in this one tight corner up here, or this core. And that's really going to be fun to watch. I am very excited. I monitor these things very carefully, just because from an education perspective, it's really important for us to know, and also it's an interesting process to me. I mean, the public comments, I read them and I kind of see what the controversies are about different AVAs, but also just even aside from like the legal, like the AVA conversation, just the number of people who are going out and finding these amazing sites and planting vineyards and starting wineries. And, I just think that it's a really fun time to be here, and I feel like we've only just begun. So it's nice to be here now.
Thank you so much, Julia. I think that your perspective brings together all of the messages that the winemakers have shared individually, and I can only echo the sentiments that you shared about getting over to the region and visiting. I do just want to say a huge thank you to everybody at the WVWA, as your support in making this series possible has been completely invaluable, and I pass on all of the thanks that I've received personally from the participating winemakers. Do see below for the website and main social media handles for the Willamette Valley Wineries Association, which I've also included in the description of all of the episodes in this series. Next time on the podcast, in episode 392, Julia passes the storytelling baton to Alex Sokolblosser of Sokolblosser Winery. Do make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast if you're not already, so that you don't miss out on any of the remaining episodes. Just head to interpretingwine.com/listen. And if you're not already, I would love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook. I'm at Wine Podcast on Twitter. And email hello@interpretingwine.com. See you next time.